out of state, then it should have the seal.
I don't know.
Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting for Tuesday, May 26, 2015. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Lucido, will you please take the roll call?
Mr. Batanti?
Here.
Mr. Brado?
Here.
Mr. Capro?
Here.
Mr. Tominello?
Here.
Mr. York?
Here.
Mr. Witt is asked to be excused. Mr. Burkest?
Here. The first item we need to address is we need to appoint an acting secretary for tonight's regular board meeting due to Mr. Witt's excused absence. So I'll be looking for a motion to appoint Mrs. Lucido.
So moved, Mr. Chair. Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. York. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mrs. Lucido, will you take the roll call?
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capro?
Yes.
Mr. Burkest?
Yes. Thank you. Next is the consent agenda, approval of the consent agenda. Mr. York has asked that we remove the special meeting minutes of May 18th, or the approval of the special meeting minutes of May 18th from the consent agenda. So I'll propose adding that as item C3.
Make a motion to approve the change to the agenda as aforementioned.
Okay. All right, we've got, so we'll just skip, at this point, we'll skip over the consent agenda. We'll approve the regular agenda by adding item C3, which is the approval of the special meeting minutes of May 18, 2015. Motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. York. Discussion, board members. Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Yes, I'd like to see the item, Michigan Townships Association annual dues pulled from the consent agenda and for discussion. In the past, the board has indicated that they would bring this out for discussion to analyze how effective that's been for the township. I believe that was a couple years ago, and I think it's about time we talked about it, because I'd like to know what we're getting for our money. So I'd ask that you remove that from the consent agenda also.
All right.
William Bardell, 18-year resident. Check. Other townships have, before the supervisor makes an announcement, I know we're not other townships, but just to make make board members aware of some of the issues coming up in the board packet. Other township, again, we're not other townships, but I think it'd be a good idea as part of our procedure to let the residents make a 1-minute comment, maybe on the board package, or a 1-minute public comment before the end of the meeting. Thank you, and you can discuss amongst yourselves if you wish, or you can blow it off. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Move back to board comment. Are there any comments, board members?
Not really sure what that last resident's request was. I'm not sure I understand it. Is it appropriate?
Sure.
William Bardell, 18-year resident. Other townships, during the supervisor's announcement, have a short period where residents may make a brief comment up to like 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes, not the 5 minutes at the end of the meeting for public comment. Not to slow the meeting down, but to bring board members aware of what's going on, either with the board packet and or something else in the township, just to kind of keep everybody into the loop and get everybody involved and get some discussion here up on the board instead of having 1 to 2.5 people on the board discussing things passionately. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I know that throughout the years, this board has had several different policies allowing public comment. I do believe allowing public comment for every motion prior to taking action, as well as a time of 5 minutes at the end of the meeting, which can be discussing any item, is a pretty liberal public comment policy. Definitely much more liberal than a majority of municipalities offer. So I don't know how much more public comment we could possibly invite other than public comment on every item we vote on, as well as public comment at the end of the meeting for approximately 5 minutes in length, which can be about any subject whatsoever.
Right.
So before we take action, as a board, we always accept public comment. So,
I would also just add that if there's something that you want to speak to that's on the agenda, you can speak to that before we adopt the agenda.
right, we have a
Yeah, you
board
can-
forum and
yeah.
you can engage in casual conversation before the meeting. Certainly, we're all approachable. I know the resident has spoke to different board members throughout, various topics and things like that. So, okay, any other discussion? We've got a motion by Mr. Tominello, a support by Mr. York to approve the agenda with the addition of item C3, the approval of the special meeting minutes of May 18th, 2015. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is, or actually, I'll back up, now the approval of the consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting and public hearing minutes of May 11th, 2015, approval of the bills in the amount of $1,386,376.59, approval of the April 2015 revenue and expenditure report, and approval of the Michigan Townships Association annual dues for fiscal year 2015-2016 in the amount of $5,553.
Make that motion?
Got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Capro. No, that, I was approving the first one was approval of the agenda. Discussion, board members? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Again, what is this club, this township association? This is like the AARP where it's a health company that sells magazines for, after you hit 50, you get a bunch of junk mail in your mailbox, and they want you to buy a magazine for $24 a year. What is this? What is this club? We already know about township. We go to upgrading classes. You guys go to upgrading. What is this 5,000? 5,000 here, 60,000 there. Who's watching the money other than Mr. York? So I gotta have some more people watching the money. Is Mr. York the only guy watching the money? I don't see any board forum. I don't see any discussion before this. I don't have any idea who you guys are other than Mr. York. Maybe Mr. Bentoni, maybe Mr. Tomarello, but I don't know any. I don't know where you guys stand on anything other than Mr. York. So I'd like to see some discussion this half hour before the board. I'd like to see some interaction. And you should open up the floor for public comment before you make a motion and get a second. You should open up the floor for public comment and maybe get some insight. And maybe not have the residents do more research than everybody else. Do a little bit of homework. It's not that hard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I asked that the Michigan Townships Association annual dues be pulled from the consent agenda for discussion and the regular agenda. I'm reading the paperwork here from the Michigan Township Association, and I invite any one of you board members up here to explain just exactly what this gobbledygook says and what benefits we actually get from Michigan Townships Association. It's a rah-rah group. The letter's a rah-rah letter. So let's get it out in the open. Let's talk about just specifically what has this township board received from the Michigan Township Association over the last 3 years, specifically. Because $5,500, you just keep paying it, went up, it's went up every year now for 3 years. You know, what are we getting for it? All you're doing is supporting a bunch of bureaucrats up at the Michigan Township Association. That's how they pay for all their bureaucrats. So I would like it removed, and I ask that it be removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. I'll do my best to answer some of the questions. The Michigan Townships Association really provides what I believe.
So the whole board can talk about it.
Please, public comment is closed. The Michigan Townships Association is an organization that I believe provides a lot of service to our township and to the over 1,200 townships in the state of Michigan. On an annual basis, they host a convention. On at least a quarterly basis, they host the what's called the Big 20. It's the top largest 20 townships in the state of Michigan. We meet, kind of discuss some of the common issues that are before us. But what I believe probably the most important function that the Michigan Townships Association provides to us is a lobbying function. So that, and I understand this even better now that one of our former supervisor is in Lansing. Regularly, when issues come before the legislature, there's an individual there whose presence is to lobby on our behalf. So I'll give you one benefit that we received last year and this year. For the time that Representative Forlini has been in Lansing, one of the issues that he's been by far the most outspoken on is revenue sharing. So, and lest I repeat myself, about 10 years ago, we got as much as $600,000 a year in constitutional revenue sharing. Last year, I should say, or 2 years ago, we were receiving nothing. That had slowly dwindled to be zero. Now, Hamtramck, by comparison, is 23,000 residents. We're about 25,000 residents. So pretty comparable in size. We could certainly call it a southeastern Michigan community. They receive $1.4 million in constitutional revenue sharing. We receive none. Now, I'm sorry, in statutory revenue sharing. In constitutional revenue sharing, we receive our share based on population. So 2 communities that have 25,000 residents receive the same amount. But at statutory revenue sharing, Hamtramck 1.4 million, Harrison Township used to get 600,000, that dwindled to zero. Representative Forlini has pushed and pushed on that. $65,000 isn't $600,000, but it's $65,000 that we weren't getting. We received that last year. We're receiving that again this year. They've just approved that, or so it's shown in the budget. In large part, those kinds of issues, when they come up, MTA has a presence. Recently, the issue of building officials was discussed, and the licensing of building officials in Lansing. MTA lobbied on behalf of allowing the licensing of building officials independent of the sponsorship of a community, which would serve to increase the pool or body of people who are qualified to serve as a building official. Currently, the only way you can become a building official is to be hired by a community and they sponsor you in becoming a building official. It makes the pool more narrow and has a kind of a chilling effect on that pool of candidates. MTA lobbied on our behalf. I did as well, but point is that they're a regular voice daily present in Lansing. So amongst the various things that they do, I believe one of their most important functions is lobbying. And for the 6.5 years that I've been on this board, I've utilized their information. They have a lot of data online. You've got a question on different issues. I know the clerk's office, sometimes they offer classes on FOIA requirements, a lot of different things. So I believe there's real value in it.
Mr. Supervisor, I've used, I've read many of the articles that have been published by the association, and I think our residents expect us to be informed and up to date, and I consider that one way of being able to do that. And I believe that in order to provide that, there is some level of infrastructure that needs to be supported, and I would suspect that dues that we pay go to help support that infrastructure. I can only say that in addition to what you've identified, I consider this association to be a valuable source of information and education for someone in my capacity.
Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Capral to approve the consent agenda, including the bills in the amount of $1,386,376.59. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is announcements. I know there's a couple of Parks and Rec events that are coming up. I don't know if you'd like to speak to those?
I would. We have our annual fishing derby. I believe it's the 11th annual fishing derby. It's open to all children, or I hate to say children when you get to a 16-year-old, but anywhere from 5 years old to 16 years old. It is June 13th, which is the free fishing weekend. It's a Saturday. It's held at Lake St. Clair Metro Park. It starts at 8 a.m. and finishes right around 11:30. And there'll be prizes for the winners of each category, and we have hot dogs and drinks for the kids. And we'd like to see everybody come out and have a good time.
And you mentioned it's free. I don't know if I caught that.
It is absolutely free, other than the park entrance fee, which would be
If you have a
the
pass. or-
participant's cost.
Yeah, sure.
However.
All right. I know that I haven't received any final numbers, but we did have the Nautical Coast cleanup on the weekend of the 15th, 16th, and 17th. I know, I think in the past they've hit 275 tons. I saw the Sea Cadets were working, removing material, and also a boat from the water, an old boat. So certainly appreciate all the efforts that residents put forward on that. Any other announcements? Hearing none, next on our agenda is item B1 from the Water and Sewer Department regarding approval of items to be sold at the Macomb County Public Auction in July. Mr. Axtell is here. Mr. Axtell, could you tell us about this item, please?
Sure. Board members, this coincides with when I came to you to purchase the new vehicles. This is simply taking some of the vehicles and adding them to the list at the Macomb County auction, which is July 20th this year. They moved it up quite a bit this year. The list had to be in by May 11th, or I take that back. Had to be in June, I believe it's June 11th. But anyways, the list had to go to Debbie Gunn, and I have a list together. I've contacted her, made requests stating that if it changed, like, because beautification committee is going to get one of the vehicles to use to water plants, and there's other vehicles in the building department I've added to the list that are old and costing us money, as I stated with the other trucks. We're going through sort of the same situation with the building department vehicles I was going through, and we're putting a lot of money into these vehicles. Mr. Spencer and I are working now to see where funds can be allocated to hopefully purchase a few vehicles to get some of these old vehicles off the road and get newer vehicles that aren't going to break down and cost us a fortune all the time. So what I'm requesting is permission to send these items over to the Macomb County auction. The office items, they were stored over in the warehouse, the old fire department warehouse. There's the old color printer and the sealer and folder for the water way we used to do the water bills, and then another little printer, which they normally, I've been to the auctions, these items don't go for a lot. The folder, looking online, it did have some value online, so hopefully we get some money for that, but the copiers normally don't go for a whole lot. So that's what I'm requesting, is to be able to send these items over. I wanted to make sure, last year I know I made the mistake of not doing this, so this year I'm bringing it forward.
Mr. York?
I was just gonna ask, do you know which truck they're gonna take, or just we'll leave it open, or?
Actually, sorry, Mr. York.
I mean, I don't care, I just don't
Well,
want
it's
somebody
already
to
removed
miss.
from this list, right?
It is, yes, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, that vehicle is already removed from
Okay.
this list, I did not add it. The Dodge
Great.
van vehicle is from the maintenance department, and the,
Item number
1998, 2500 series truck, that's the red, truck that was in the fire department that then went to the building department to use as an inspection vehicle.
Right, so-
And then the other three, the other three are mine.
No, that's fine, I just don't want someone to misconstrue for me.
And as I stated, Mrs. Gunn at the county has been great, and their policy states that the list can change up to and including the day of the auction. So if something came up, I would bring it forward to you and say, okay, look, this is what's changed. But that way we can utilize, and we've done pretty well with the vehicles at the auction. It's the other stuff that normally doesn't sell well. Auctions, or the vehicles do very well.
So of these 5 items, the first 3 were water and sewer trucks, but we bought 4 trucks. So one of the 4 trucks that we took out of service from water and sewer, we're keeping as for maintenance and put a tank in it to be able to water some of the plantings and things like that. It's not dedicated to beautification, but that's one of the functions that the truck will serve. So that's 3 of the trucks. The fourth, item number 4 is from the building department, and item number 5 is, I'm not even sure where that van came from, but it's just been, it runs, but it hasn't been used as a vehicle for several years.
So I'm willing to make a motion. I don't know if the board wants to, if we're gonna add, remove this and that, or, and I'm just asking this question, I'm more than happy to make this motion to approve this, but if you want me to add that, you know, whatever, the 3 full-time officials can add something if need be, something to that effect,
I would appreciate that, Mr.
rather
York.
than
would
having
make-
it just, you know, okay, we have a printer, let's bring it to the board and
Sure.
all right. Well,
And I think, and along those lines, I think what Dave was referring to in terms of a change was, let's say that, you know, tomorrow the engine on that on that beautification truck blows, we would obviously want to pull one of these out of that auction. I think we were looking more that the potential exists that we could not sell one of these.
Right,
if we
I
needed
just
to.
don't wanna get locked in and
Sure.
then seeing that we have, you know, something else with the printer and, oh, let's bring one printer to the board that's worth $50, you know. or-
Yeah.
I would say any kind of surplus item or, you know.
Yeah.
Yep. So how do you want to word that motion?
That's a darn good question. Motion to approve the following items, the attached items to be sold at the Macomb County Public Auction on Saturday, July 20th, 2015. And any other surplus items can be added to the list with approval of the full-time officials.
Okay,
I don't really care.
I'll support that.
all right. All right, we got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello. Is there any discussion, board members?
I just want to clarify, Mr. Axtell, placing these vehicles in auction doesn't presume that we're going to get any other vehicles. You had mentioned that there might be a need down the road for other vehicles, but that presumption isn't part of placing these in auction.
No, sir.
Okay.
This is strictly, these are vehicles that have been sitting, as Mr. Verkes said, the van actually came from the water department to the building department. It has not been a dependable vehicle, so it hasn't been run a lot. It's sitting, let's get what we can while we can, instead of letting it just rot into the ground.
Thank you. Good.
All right, any other board comment? We'll open up the floor for public comment.
William Bardell. What I'd like to know is, when we bought these new trucks, I don't remember seeing the mileage. I remember the pictures of the rusted out floorboards. Now, I don't know if you guys take it to the shop and you hose down the bottom of the vans, but 70,000 is, I mean, I'm all for this, trading them in because you already got the new ones, but I don't remember the actual mileage. I could be wrong. I've been known to be wrong once in a while. that these mileage was so low, like 121 or 70,000, 151, 155, 137. 137, that's certainly low. That's for a work truck, if it's a V8. The only thing that's really going to go is your timing belt and your water pump. You do the water pump, you do the timing belt. And if the air conditioning's not good, then you don't have air conditioning for 10 years. That's not going to kill anybody. So you don't have air conditioning, you replace the timing belt and the water pump and maybe a radiator, some hoses and belts. There's no reason to blow a transmission unless you don't know how to drive in the snow. It's something you do when you're 16 or 17. But I just ask everybody, food for thought, to look at these low mileages on V8 work trucks. About 175, yeah, then you start looking at trucks. Maybe 200,000, you might start looking at trucks. But I realized in 1997, after they spot welded the unibody together, they didn't phosphate wash it and blow dry it, spot weld it, zinc it, galvanize it, wash it again, and put it together like they do now. So, yeah, there could be some rust problems. But let's keep an eye on these mileages. If your air conditioning don't work, then you don't have air conditioning. It's not going to kill anybody. If you're working on sewers, air conditioning is not going to hurt anybody. So, water pump, timing belt, radiator, hoses, that's it. There's no reason to blow a transmission. And I don't know what department that was, but these mileages look awful low to me. But anyway, go ahead and sell them, but I want to make that comment. I think about 200,000, 175 with a V8, and you can start looking at trucks. But take them back to the shop, hose down the bottom. You know, back at the shop, you should have a hot water, hose that down after the car cools down, hose it down, get the salt off there. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. I know we discussed this, and Mr. Axtell, you may have some comments. All of these vehicles are between 15 and 20 years old, and the mileage is really probably not necessarily the primary concern that we have in terms of replacing them. It's the deterioration of the body. So, for example, the 1998 GMC 3/4 ton 4-wheel drive truck. That truck served as the command officer vehicle in the fire department for, I'm not quite certain, perhaps 10 years. After that, the truck then went into service in the building department, and that was used for some part of those years. For a while, it was broken down, it sat. Dave's guys went through it a couple years ago, got it running, used it a couple times. Lately, they haven't been using it. Dave knows better the condition of these, but I don't think the primary issue is the mechanical soundness of the engine or the miles. It has a lot to do with the rust, but Mr. Axtell.
Okay, yes. First, let me assure you, all of our vehicles are kept inside. They are hosed down, kept clean, especially in the wintertime with the salt vehicles. They are washed. The beds are lifted on the dump trucks. Everything is cleaned thoroughly. We do our very best to keep them clean and in good running condition. The biggest issues we've had with a lot of the vehicles, the engines they run great. You do have your external components, fuel pumps and things of that nature.
Alternator.
Brake lines, fuel lines, things like that, that rot out and go bad. We are fortunate to have the group of guys we have that can work on them and save us a lot of money, but it gets to the point. I did have all of the mileage in the listing when I brought the vehicles forward, and I had every folder here for questions regarding how much money we put into each vehicle, which was an astronomical amount when they get to be this age. But the biggest thing is with our vehicles, fire department vehicles, all municipal vehicles, the mileage is one thing. It's the hours on the vehicle that is another, and the heating of the fluid, because our vehicles, when we're out, they run the whole time due to the lights. We almost always have our amber lights on unless we're just in motion, but when we're on a water break or any situation, we have to block the roads or make us so that we are seen. So the truck is running, so the batteries don't go dead, so they're running, and it's just hours. There is a calculation factor to convert hours to mileage, and it would be astronomical. So now the new vehicles have hour meters on it, so that'll be another factor I can bring forward in the future. But these vehicles they are truly falling apart. It would be poor management on my part to keep coming to you and putting money into these vehicles that it's breakdown maintenance, so.
So, but corrosion is a big factor also in the condition of the vehicles.
Absolutely. It's Michigan. I mean, we can keep them as clean as we can. They're in a heated facility, but I'm sorry, it's not the greatest quality of steel these days, and we see it.
Yep, gotcha. Okay.
Mr. Supervisor, just one other comment. Before we voted on that motion, I went to the garage and had Mr. Axtell and his crew take me around to all the trucks, show me the condition, because we are expected to be stewards of these funds. And so I thought it was incumbent upon me to take a look at the vehicles, and Mr. Axtell's team showed me what they did to maintain them and what kind of work they applied to these trucks. They were in terrible condition. There was rust that I would be concerned about the safety of the individuals using the trucks. And while I'm not a mechanic, I would also agree it's the time that it's in service. And it's short hauls around the township and not long highway miles. So I think it was fully warranted to replace them, and I appreciate the work that Mr. Axtell's crew does on those trucks.
Thank you.
Any other board comments?
I agree with Mr. Batante's remarks about the trucks, the astronomical amount of wear and tear that they take, especially in water main breaks, things like that, where they're running constantly. I know that Dave and his crew do a good job of maintaining the vehicles as best they can, but they reach a point where the undercarriage is just total rust, and there's nothing you can do.
Yep.
We didn't engineer and manufacture the vehicles, we just bought them.
That's right, that's right. And we're certainly thankful for the fact that we were able to replace these trucks. I mean, really pretty darn nice four-wheel drive trucks, 3/4 ton. I think they were like 26 grand or something. So it's important to understand also that for lack of a better word, I guess I would say, as a corporation, General Motors is pretty generous to municipalities on what we can replace these vehicles for. You or I could not go out and buy the trucks that we bought for the prices that we buy them for. That doesn't mean that we should just rush right out and get them, but the point is that, you look at a vehicle that's gone 15, 20 years, and, you paid 25 grand for the thing. Obviously, these were less 15 years ago, but I mean, there is a life cycle to the vehicle. There's a point where if you say, well, it costs us about $1,000 to $1,500 a year to own these things, to buy them, when your maintenance reaches the point where you're spending more than that and you're losing time with the vehicle, there's a point where you say, sell it to someone else who might have a different use for it, but it's starting to become too costly for us to own. So, any other discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello, and I'll do my best to remember a motion to approve the attached list of 8 items to be sold at the Macomb County Public Auction on Saturday, July 20th, 2015, and to allow any miscellaneous items to be added or removed from the list with the approval of the 3 full-time officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on the agenda is item C1. Approval to hire a department secretary in the fire department. Board members, we have interviewed several candidates for the position at Station 2. We've approved so far 2 candidates, and apparently their existing employers thought they were good candidates also, because both were working in a part-time basis, and once we offered them the position, both people that this board approved were given a full-time position and presumably some sort of an increase from their current employer, so those fell through. There was a candidate that I think we interviewed for the last water and sewer position that we hired, that was within the top of the list, and then also with this round. And so we believe that Miss Paula Phyllis would be a good hire for the position at the fire station. I don't know if there's any discussion or a motion. We've already done this twice so far.
And Miss Paula Phyllis is not related to anybody in the
Nope.
township? No
Nope.
previous board members, nothing like that?
Nope, she's been with her current or prior employer for almost 27 years. She's a resident of the township, interviewed well, references all checked out, and certainly with the understanding that this person is gonna end up working pretty closely with the fire chief. You know, his opinion was also pretty important in this whole process, and he felt real good about the hire as well. But no, there's no relationship, no that I know of, or that we uncovered during the interview process. Is there a motion?
I think we've interviewed her like 6 times.
Right, couple times the last time around, couple times this time. Yep, I told her she can claim residency in that conference room.
I'll make a motion to hire Miss Paula Phillips for the position of Department Secretary for the Fire Department at the contract rate of $18.20 per hour, $37,847.72 annual salary, plus benefits, subject to the completion of a successful 90-day probationary period.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Capral. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Brado. Discussion, board members? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now you got a third chance to save 60 Gs. Now, the one thing I want to ask is, 40% of me doesn't mind giving all this money to the fire department, but my thing is, can they at least be residents? Is this lady, I'm sure she's a fine lady, but giving her this great, job with 60,000 full boat, does she at least, live in our township, invest in our township? Well, I don't feel so bad if she lives in our township. Okay? But, why can't our firemen, that we give them all this money, why can't they, isn't our township good enough for them? So I would advise when we get this imaginary board together to try to raise our taxes for the fire department, which I think you guys already got us for $500,000, and that's supposed to only be temporary, that when we do negotiate, we do put it in there to say, hey, why don't you guys move to Harrison Township if you love it so much? You want to make all this big money. I'm not a big fan of race to the bottom, but I think you should live in a township that you support and that you work for. I think you should live in a township and support our township. I'll leave it at that and carry on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Sunstock, 31698, San Juan. Yep, we're back again, 3 times. Geez, seems like we've had divine intervention here. He's giving you 3 chances to save this money. And this time you got up and didn't even say a word about it, other than, oh, we'll just hire this one. You didn't discuss whether or not it would be a good idea to save the money. Didn't discuss whether or not the new fire committee had met and had made their grand decision on this, which they were supposed to do according to this board. They were going to be looking at this to determine whether or not it was a good idea. Oh wait, they haven't even met yet. Well, they'll meet a couple weeks before they decide to ask us for tell us that we need a fire department increase and we need a tax increase. Again, you guys are not doing your job. Plain and simple, not doing your job. You've had 2 chances already. This is your 3rd chance to finally do the responsible thing and save some money towards the deficit that's coming and looming here by the end of the summer. And you're doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. People are taking note of that. So if you think you're going to push some kind of tax increase forward, you might be smarter to say, no, we're not going to hire this person We're gonna do the responsible thing and hope that the residents say, well, at least they're trying and they're doing the responsible things, and there's still $250,000 in the hole, or 400,000, or whatever the number is. But you ain't even doing that. You're just arrogantly determining that you're going to override the citizens, and you're going to basically tell the citizens you're going to pay a tax increase. That's what this board is doing. Well, we'll see. I think that the people are getting sick and tired of tax increases with a government that doesn't do anything but take. And that's what's happening here. So please overrule this and turn down this new hire and do the responsible thing. If not for me, do it for the residents, and if not for the residents, do it for yourself, because people are watching. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Is there any further board comment?
I just have one comment, and I've said it every meeting before, so I'm not gonna argue it. I like this candidate. I've always liked this candidate. I think everybody knows that. Paul, I think I've been saying Paul for a while now, and Adam, Ken, and I agree on this candidate. But as much as I like the candidate, I still worry about the budget and the fire, and I would have no problem voting yes for this candidate. Make a motion for that if we didn't have the deficit in the fire budget. So, you know, I think everybody knows how I'm gonna vote. I just wanted, you know, really let the candidate know that it's not against her. It's really just, if the budget didn't have a deficit, I'd be more than willing to be on board with this.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Any other board comment?
I think we're all concerned about the fire department and their budget, and I think we're all concerned about the deficit. But I think we're also concerned that we need to have a fire department that can manage their workload, and we need to have the right staffing in place to provide the services for health and safety for the residents. I think it's poor management on our part not to do that. That's why I'm supporting the new hire.
Mr. Supervisor, we're talking about fire department finances, and this is part of it. And I think we need to be sure, and I think if any of the residents have watched any of these proceedings, they would know that there have been steps addressed already relative to fire department finances. We have not replaced a couple of firefighters, numbers 2 or 3. We have been through binding arbitration to attempt to address some of a large part of the finances. And in addition to that, we've assembled a committee that's intended to take a prudent view of how we can possibly offer services to the residents that are safe and properly funded without making any sort of rash decision based on finances alone. So I think that we should be able to go on record saying that that's what's been done so far, at least. And I'm looking forward to the committee's insight into what we might do going forward.
The budget for the police is basically the millage we collect pays for the police services that we have. Realistically, every aspect of our financial house is in order with the exception of the fire department. The fire department millage is, I don't know percentage, but 5.54 mils out of 7.17, which includes a half mil for the library. It's clearly the vast majority of the millage that we collect. But even with the additional half mil of revenue, the reality is our taxable value is down quite a bit from what it was at its peak in 2008 or 9. And it's capped to come back at, you know, the rate of inflation, which has been 1-2% type numbers. So, you know, it's a challenge. Since the majority of taxes that we collect, property taxes, go to the fire department, and taxable value has dropped and it's capped from coming back, it's no surprise that the one department that is dependent mostly on property taxes is struggling. So, there's no doubt, everybody here, I think, we've talked about it an awful lot. There's no doubt we have a challenge, in funding our fire department.
And it's not that our residency hasn't declined from 27,000 to 18,000. It's still up there.
Yep.
So they still have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely.
And for us to handcuff them so they can't do their job is not right. I just don't think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, I wasn't gonna debate this, but I gotta say this. The problem isn't the property values. The problem is very simple. The problem isn't even the deficit. The problem is that we have deficit spent for the last 4 years, and there's nothing left in the savings account. Having a deficit is no big deal. The problem is that we went through the $2 million that we had in savings over the last 4 years, so that $200,000 deficit now, we have no money to pay it. That's where the problem really lies. That's a fact. Those are facts. We run through, so there's no money tree anymore in the fire department. So the longer that we carry this on, month by month by month by month by month, and delaying it, delaying it, delaying it, doesn't get you any closer to erasing that debt or where we're gonna pay for it. My guess is at the end of the day, we're gonna end up taking general fund money and putting it toward the fire. That'd be my guess, because you're not gonna have money to pay wages. There'll be no money in the fire fund at the end of the year. Period. We all know that. That's all I have to say.
Any other board comment? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Capra with support by Mr. Brado to hire Ms. Paula Phyllis for the position of Department Secretary for the Fire Department at the rate in the contract of $18.20 per hour, or $37,847.72 annual salary, plus benefits, subject to the completion of a successful 90-day probationary period. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda is item C2 regarding noxious weed cutting charges. Per our policies and procedures, the Board of Trustees shall annually establish payable amounts for weed cutting. Last meeting, we did approve rates. However, in conversation with our ordinance officer, this is the first year that our ordinance officer is handling the noxious weed cutting. And he'd proposed a different rate structure for paying our noxious weed cutters, basically the folks that do the cutting for us. There are vendors that do this work utilizing software that they have, where we load the program on our ordinance officer's computer. He punches in the information. They use it to track all of the items. For example, property numbers, GIS, literally mapping for their guys to go right to the location. They store all their photographs there. They keep all their records on there, so it makes it easier for us to track that information. The companies that we found, however, that do this work, that are more reliable, don't work on a per lot basis. They work on a per hour basis, based on the fact that some lots need more service or more attention or more labor than others. So we've proposed, as opposed to saying a flat charge of $75 per lot, we've got four different fee structures. $50 an hour for zero-turn lawnmowers, $45 per hour for string trimming, $75 per hour for brush hogging, which is larger equipment, and $35 per residential lot for any miscellaneous debris removal. Now, our ordinance says that we'll charge $100 plus $50 per hour with 1 hour minimum. So that's for residential lot cleanups. So with this structure, if a fellow goes out there and they spend 2 hours to clean up a yard, because in some cases, by the time you get a call and by the time we get a contractor out there, it could take a few days. 12 inches may now be more than 12 inches, and it's a challenge with the equipment. So if the fellow spends 2 hours, we pay him $100, we charge the resident $200. We pay him, basically what we take in plus the $100 penalty per lot. So we would like to try an hourly rate structure, which corresponds to the program that they use to see, track it and see if this, you know, if this becomes a significant cost, then we may have to look at some other way of doing it. But this is the way our ordinance officer had requested that we do it. We can't lose money because we charge more than what we pay. And that's really to try to cover the time that the ordinance officer has. And truly, there's some penalty in there. We don't really want to cut people's lawns. We want
Right.
them to do it themselves. So we don't necessarily want to make it easy. There was a time, I think we've had this discussion, when we just charged what we paid. And that became burdensome because pretty soon folks just said, well, let the township do it for us. We want folks to take care of their own property. But occasionally, there's a vacant parcel or a piece of property that might have changed hands, changed ownership, it's sitting, and it becomes a burden to the neighborhood. So we believe this is a way we can quickly address that and pay for the right amount of work to be done, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is.
I was
Discussion?
confused when it said this more closely corresponds to the rate structure we charge property owners. So I'm thinking, well, at 50, that seems pretty close to what we charge the property owner.
Right, but it's $100 plus $50 per hour
Okay.
with a 1 hour minimum.
Because, well, you know, I think that we both have had the residents in our offices at different times, whether it's they go to your office or they're paying, you know, at my place,
Sure.
you know, whatever. You know, and I just tell the resident, you know, I agree, they're high because we don't want to be your lawn service.
Right,
We truly are not in the lawn mowing business. We don't want to be in the lawn mowing business, and that's why it's like that. You know, it's $150 because you can go hire your own lawn service for 2 months for that.
well, here's what I look at. On a street with 20 homes, there may be one home where the property isn't being cut. I know that if I cut that grass, that one homeowner may not be happy. But what I'm trying to do is make sure that as quickly as possible, and with a rate structure that corresponds to the actual work that's done, so that we have a good quality of cut folks out there doing the work, landscapers. I want to make sure that I make the other 19 people happy on the street. So someone says, look, this home is a dump, it needs to be cleaned up. I want somebody who's going to go out there, clean it up quickly. And we may get that one guy who comes in and doesn't like the $200 bill, but what I really don't
We've
like.
had a few.
Right, but what I really don't like is when that resident comes in and complains, and we find ourselves a week later seeing that person saying, grass still hasn't been cut. So we're trying to streamline the process, utilizing the software, and that's the purpose.
The only thing that I might say, the $35 per residential lot debris removal, that might be a little low.
Well, here's
I
what,
could almost hire, that's almost what, it's probably less than what somebody would charge me to come to my house to actually do that.
right. This is the rate structure that was proposed in working with these various vendors. They still do other services. So for example, if
Are
there's.
these the vendors, or are these what we're charging the?
No, these are what we'll pay the vendors. We charge
Okay.
$100 more than that.
Okay. So we charge the homeowners these same numbers plus 100?
Correct. We charge them $50 per hour, $100 plus $50 per hour with a 1 hour minimum. That's what our current,
Okay.
that's what's been
I
posted
think
and
it's a good
advertised.
idea to stay consistent, so.
Are we, so is this isn't a contractual obligation we have to somebody?
Nope.
So if what we're asking to approve tonight is the establishment of these rates, and I think you mentioned, Mr. Supervisor, that we will assign someone, whether it's the ordinance officer, to monitor this, and should we find that we're somehow not being properly compensated, we can re-examine this. So
Absolutely.
we're not under obligation to pay somebody for even the season.
Correct. Right. This is, what we did in the past is we approved, I think, maybe 4 or 5 companies that do this work. But in corresponding with them, and after having a conversation with our ordinance officer, he proposed that as opposed to, what had happened was there was a time a few years back when what we did was we incorporated whoever cut our lawn, our property, also did the noxious weeds. So that was one contract with one provider, cut our grass, but also do the noxious weed cutting. What we're finding is that the guys who do the regular weekly cuts to our properties, are a different set of vendors than the guys who will go out and specifically go after this work. These guys look for a per hour rate. That's how they're structured. So we're trying to force something from a prior contract with a flat amount per lot when our ordinance says we'll charge by the hour, and the companies that do this work do the same.
So I think it's fine as long as we can be assured that someone will keep an eye on it, so that we're not, you know, that we're still on an even keel regarding how much we spend versus how much we're getting.
Absolutely. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve weed cutting costs for 2015 of $50 per hour for zero-turn lawnmowers, $45 per hour for string trimming, $75 per hour for parcels needing brush hogging, and $35 per residential lot for debris removal.
We've got a motion by Mr. Batanti. Is there support?
Support.
All right. We've had a fair amount of discussion. Is there further, or we'll open up the floor for public comment?
Jim Senstock, 31698 San Juan. One of the concerns I have when you go to a per hour rate is the potential for abuse. Who's going to watch and determine that an hour was taken, or an hour and a half, or hour and hour and 3/4? Or how about if they decide to charge you for driving their truck over there with that zero-turn lawnmower on it? Well, it took us 20 minutes to get over there, so we put that on, and that's where we start. Who's going to do that? The one advantage to the hourly or the lot rate is that it is fixed. You take the job because that's what you're going to get paid. There's no potential for abuse whatsoever. There is a lot of potential for abuse here. And the first time it gets caught, there's going to be a firestorm about it. Somebody's going to do it. It's set up to be that way. These guys are not exactly what I would call the salt of the earth type of guys. They're looking for whatever advantage they can get. And if they see that it's not being watched, if it's not being policed, and they can get 2 hours for a job that only took an hour, what a windfall. So before you go making all these changes to this per your ordinance enforcement officer, ask him exactly what he's going to do to police it. How is he going to make sure that we're getting the hours spent, time spent, versus some other number? And ask him to put that in writing. Because it's going to happen, guys. I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. I think the resident is exactly right. We did have a pretty lengthy conversation with our ordinance enforcement officer about this. And truly, one of the reasons why in the past we went to a flat rate was to avoid this. But what we found was that it changed the pool of providers that were available to do the work. So keeping in mind the residents' comments and a comment that I said that you'd echoed, this is an attempt to try to handle noxious weeds differently. In the past, we have struggled with getting to the property and getting the property cut in a relatively quick turnaround. And we're trying to do that. If in the process of doing that, we find that the costs are escalating, we've obviously got to go with a different plan. But I mean, you know, we've discussed all sorts of things. I got to tell you, and again, echoing the residents' comments, you know, this isn't necessarily fun work, but, you know, for a fellow that sets up a business to do this, this is a pretty lucrative way to spend your summer. I mean, this is steady work for someone. And the conversation was had of saying, well, you know, not unlike what the beach does, having temporary employees. I mean, we could look at something like that. But it enters into a whole nother factor. Before I bring a proposal to this board saying that we're going to have some, you know, summer help or, you know, high school, college type kids and getting into everything, buying the equipment, making that investment, I'd really like to first try this, but I can't agree enough. It is imperative that we keep an eye on those. I've had those conversations with Mr. Condon, and, you know, in every way that I've interacted with him since he's been on board, he's demonstrated some pretty good common sense, and I have no doubt that he'll keep an eye on these. Now, the potential exists for abuse. I recognize that. The real question, I think, is, do we have someone who's monitoring it and understands this and is wise to the fact that the potential for a problem exists? We discussed it at length before I brought this, so I appreciate that comment, but we have talked about it, and we will
Well, you
talk
just
about it ongoing.
talked me right out of the hourly rate.
It's an inherent risk, but the flip side is the flat amount per lot doesn't work either, because you can go to one property and you show up and you cut. It's real easy. You can go to another one and the guy's got trees and he's got downed limbs that are laying in the middle of the yard, and he's got a gate and you can't get the gate open, and you know, so every lot isn't the same. Now, what we talked about in prior years is there were winners and losers, but you know, the rate structure we have is an hourly rate. We literally charge residents by the hour. So if we pay someone 2 hours to do the work, we charge them 2 hours plus $100.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the people that are paying this bill are the people that didn't cut their grass in the first
Are
place.
people, yeah, or absent business, or landlords that have just walked away from a property. You know, generally speaking,
Banks.
yeah, not good neighbors, right? I shouldn't, I can't stress
Not
it
that
enough.
banks aren't good neighbors, I'm sorry.
No, that's
But
You know,
banks
then-
that are out of state sometimes own properties and they don't take care of them.
So
absolutely.
we've discussed the fact that it needs to be monitored.
Yep.
And we acknowledge that. This is not a long-term commitment.
Nope.
If we find that it doesn't work, we can change it.
I changed it
So,
since 2 weeks ago.
I think that
I
it's a
can come back.
reasonable concern, but it's addressed.
I mean, if it has a little bit of abuse, we don't pay it anyways.
True, but that's not a good, and that's a valid point, but it's not a good reason. That's why I say,
Well, I think
feel
it is.
comfortable.
I'll tell you why it's a good reason.
Yeah, we're not gonna lose.
Because I'll go back to my original comment. The township doesn't want to be in the lawn mowing business.
Absolutely, that's my, that's.
Period.
Right.
We don't want to ever do it.
Right. What I do want, and that's my whole point, I either worry about treating the one guy on the street nice or
I
treating the other
understand.
19
I
nice.
understand.
And what we've struggled with is to get someone who gets out there and gets it done and does a good job.
Right.
We've used one of these companies just to clean up the property adjacent to Ashland. There's a parcel there that we always end up mowing. It's beautiful. They did a great job. I mean, they took a weedy lot and groomed it like it's a residential property. So, but you sometimes you get what you pay for.
Now what happens, just so the board knows, maybe you're aware of this or not, at the end of the summer, if people don't pay those invoices, they get put on the tax bill,
Right.
the December tax bill. So,
You always pay your taxes.
yeah, we always get our money, and then, of course, everybody waits till February 28th to come in and complain about that portion.
That's right.
On
And
their
then pay
tax
some
bill,
interest, right? All right, we had a fair amount of discussion. Is there any other discussion?
Now, they aren't gonna charge people for driving over there, correct? We're gonna make sure that,
That's part of the monitoring process. It's
Okay.
part of saying, how did you come up with 1 hour, 2 hours, so on and so forth.
because I know the guy pulls up my lawn with that zero turn thing, and he's, actually mine and my neighbor's lawn, he's in and out. If it's 45 minutes for both our lawns, I'd be surprised.
Yep,
But the problem there is your grass is cut every week.
that's
Yeah,
the
that's a good
difference.
point,
That's
isn't it?
That's what's the problem, because these guys don't just drop and
Yeah.
nail it and leave. When you do that same lot every week, you know the
Okay,
lot, you
yeah.
fix the things, you're not going through 12 inches, you're not hitting a cinder block that some bonehead stuck in the middle of the lawn because he was ticked off that you're cutting his grass. I mean, it's
Well, there
it's
has been a
different
rock
business.
that the kids left on occasion.
All right. Okay, we've got a motion by Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. Caprell to approve weed cutting costs for 2015, $50 per hour for zero-turn lawnmowers, $45 per hour for string trimming, $75 per hour for parcels needing brush hogging, and $35 per residential lot for debris removal.
Still think you should raise that debris removal, but if you think you can find someone, seems a little low to me, but.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is item C3 regarding the minutes from May 18th of 2015.
Yep, board members, just real quick, there was a special board meeting May 18th. I wasn't properly notified. It says absent on there. Should be at least excused because didn't know about the meeting.
All right. So would the motion in order be to approve the minutes with the amendment to say excused?
I guess so.
All right, would you make that motion?
No, I'm not gonna make the motion because I'm gonna vote in the,
I'll make a motion that we amend the minutes to show Mr. York excused.
All right. I guess we would say approve the minutes with the amendment. Is that
Yes.
friendly? So a motion motion by Mr. Batanti to approve the May 18th special board meeting minutes with the change of Mr. York excused. All right, is there support?
Support.
yes, and I wanna say, I talked to Marge prior to the meeting and, not blaming anybody or going into it, but I think everybody somewhat agrees that,
Well, it was emailed.
Well, how,
the law,
I do have a concern, though. Hold on, I do have a concern. Well, how do we notify for meetings, so we all know? I mean, what's the normal procedure to notify somebody of a meeting? I mean, I think I know the answer, but I'm asking.
Normally, the
So,
cl-
for the
clerk's
residents.
office emails, and I
Right.
always give a hard copy, like I'll put one in your inboxes and I'll hand them out. I
Okay.
did not give a hard copy this time, I just emailed
Okay,
everyone. And and I emailed the board and the two, deputies.
okay. So that is not acceptable? Email?
no.
It's not, okay. So I'm asking, I don't know what's,
The law says, and actually I have it here. The law says, the notice shall designate, this is 42.7, Michigan Township Charter Act, with regards to special meeting notices. The notice shall designate the time, place, and purpose of the meeting and shall be served personally or left at the member's usual place of residence by the township clerk or someone designated by the township clerk. Normally what happens, Marge comes and hands me it because I'm normally there. We sort of had a comedy of errors that happened and.
Okay.
And I
was it
emailed.
posted in the building?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all, yeah, we always post it.
So it was posted and it was
in
emailed?
here. And it goes on, I'm not sure if Andrew puts it online.
He
And
does.
it was online. So it was on the website, it was posted in the building, and it was emailed. Those three things is, okay, just want to make sure I'm clear.
But when you're a trustee being called to a special meeting, there's special requirements. That's why they have it. Here you go. You hand it to somebody as a trustee. For the public, you just have to post it 18 hours prior
Okay.
in like 3 places. But if you're a trustee, here's a special meeting notice.
Okay. So normally we all get an email or we get something posted in the building if we're in and out of the building all day or all week. And we get something placed on the website so that the general population and the township and the residents, and the full-time and part-timers can see that as well.
Right. And normally you get a copy.
And all those
You'll-
things were done.
You'll have one in your,
Okay.
in your inbox, in your mailbox.
I don't quite know what happened with my email. It's the email that Marge sent is in my deleted folder, and I, at that point, we're having trouble with the computer system, and it's slow and laggy, and it was,
The only problem
we're
that I
not
have
having a very
with this
fun
whole
time with
thing
it.
is, it sounds like the clerk, deputy clerk are being blamed for something, and I don't think they really did anything wrong. They did what they were supposed to do. So, that's, the only issue that I have with the situation is that everybody else managed to make it here, including people that don't work here every single day. And we made it, but we're kind of being forced to excuse you for something where you were really kind of notified.
No, I wasn't really kind of notified. Let's read. All right, I was hoping to avoid this, okay? It was not handed to me, okay? The law provides two ways.
Do you miss meetings if they're not handed to you? Have you ever missed a meeting because it wasn't handed to you? Ever?
No, because it's normally handed to me.
Okay.
Or normally, the paper is sitting on my desk, so I can post it on cable. There was no paper.
Okay.
Normally, Marge, even if I'm not there, Marge will set that document down right on my desk So the first thing I see is, oh, special meeting, put it up. But once again, phone call, text, carrier pigeon, whatever, doesn't count. What counts in a special meeting is two things. Either hand someone a document or you post it on their place of residence. Now, this has never happened to me before. That's why I'm not trying to call anybody out. You can call it what it is. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying that I was a little thrown back when, it said absent. I'll tell you, I certainly would have, if I was the clerk, put down excuse for any of you guys who weren't here. Period. Whether you called me or not. That's just the way that I am. I would have just put you as excused and been done with it. But what actually happened was I saw the email from Ken that said, hey, is everybody available? And I think Mr. Tominello responded that, yeah, and then I didn't get anything, so I assumed that there was no meeting. When I saw the meeting minutes, when I saw the board meeting on Thursday with these meeting minutes, first thing I did was call Ryan and said, hey, Ryan, was there a special meeting Monday? And he went and did some research and said, yeah, there was.
All right,
So I'll just leave it at that.
sure. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Jim Senstock, 31698 San Juan. I wasn't going to say anything until Mr. Brado interjected what he had to say. The fact of the matter is the state law is not open to your interpretation, Mr. Brado. If it says it must be handed to somebody, it must be handed to somebody. Darren made it very clear that he was not blaming Marge, that he just wanted it excused. And your response was, well, you're asking me to make you excused because you didn't come to the meeting? Well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Brado, if you want to pick and choose what laws you want to pick and choose to follow, continue on that path. But the law is very clear. He read it to you. And you still made a stupid comment like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. We talked about it at length. Is there any further comments?
I'm done with it, so.
All right. Yep, hearing no further comment, we have a motion by Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. Caprell to approve the special board meeting minutes of May 18th, 2015, with the amendment of changing from absent to excused. Mr. York?
Could you do a roll call?
Sure. Mrs. Lucido?
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Caprell?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
No.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. York?
No.
Mr. Verkest?
Yes. All right,
Motion
next.
carries.
Yep, thank you. Next on our agenda is public comments.
William Bardell, 18-year resident. I want to make a comment real quick about the maintenance trucks. You can have there's no reason why those trucks should be running when you got the lights on. You can have auxiliary batteries like they do in a boat. You switch them over. Once you turn the key, you flip the battery over. So that takes care of that. Also, those barrels that were up there on Metropolitan Parkway and North Point, I think they've been there long enough. I think they've been there 3 weeks. I think it's time to take those down now. I think the ground's settled, or whatever you gotta do. It's been 3 weeks. We know you guys fixed the main over there. So it's time to get the barrels out of there for whatever reason. Maybe there is a reason. Maybe you gotta, they gotta compact the dirt and so forth, and there's some procedures that you go through, but, I'd like to keep an eye on that. Other thing I wanna talk about is, we had a guy come out to the Plan Commission from Kroger and wanted to sell the people on Beamer a gas station. And this guy was pretty arrogant. These people that live on Beamer are very nice people. They're very sweet people. And they want to live in peace. They want to enjoy their backyard. This hotshot from Kroger, who we've been good to for many, many years, in our community and let them have their awnings and their skids full of stuff and their seasonal things. Well, this guy came, and in my opinion, he talked to the people of this township like they were 11 years old. Enough about that. The other thing I want to talk about is, I think the people on Vandy, when they find out there's going to be a cell tower coming at the end of their street, I don't think they're going to be real happy either. The other thing I would like to say is, I hope we can have about a minute of public comment before we start the meeting. Now, is that going to change our $200,000 in the Red Fire Department budget? I don't know. Is that going to stop the liquor license given to a private club, which I know, Mr. York, you voted against, and I think Mr. Bentoni, I believe you and Mr. Tominello voted against, I think, but I know, Mr. York, you voted against that. I applaud you for that. Are we going to have no bid contracts with Wade Trim? I understand the romance with your favorites. We all have our favorites. But in the private sector, you compete. Stop the no bid contracts. We're paying between $6,000 and $9,000, even if those are not Fred Flintstone drawings. And to have a progress meeting every 2 weeks for a 15-week job, my head's going to explode. Paying $25,250 to Wade Trim. Again, I understand the romance. We all have our favorites, but they got to compete. Stop the no bid contracts. Period. Again, is this will comments before the board meeting, will this stop the downtown authority? Will this stop a cell tower going in at the end of Vandy Street? Again, I'm sure there was debate in 2007. I was probably working 80 hours a week in 2007. But I'm sure there was a lot of debate on this 155-acre parcel to protect the wetland and provide for recreation opportunities in the community. And I'm sure we had lots of debate on that. So, and I did read the ordinance about cell towers, yes. There's no way you can put a cell tower in something zoned residential. Even with a special land use, you can't do it. You might be able to do it special land use in other districts that are maybe a business district, but not in something zoned residential. But they can come back and go with the board and everyone can approve it, and here we go again. Is this going to be like the liquor license that we gave to a private company? Private Good Old Boys Club? I'm not against Good Old Boys Club, but I'm against giving the last liquor license to a private club. Think about the people that live on Beamer. Think about the people that live on Vandy. So go ahead and twist it around and rebuttal it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Senstock, 31698 San Juan. I wanted to comment briefly on the hiring of the departmental secretary for the fire department. I pretty well beat that one to death, but I did want to comment on some of the comments that were made. Specifically, Mr. Brado indicating that hiring a departmental secretary was a health, safety, and welfare issue. I don't know what health, safety, and welfare issue you're talking about, but eliminating 2 firefighters, as Mr. Battani indicated, that's a health, safety, and welfare issue. A department secretary is not. My suggestion to you, Mr. Brado, is in rather than saying something when you really don't know what you're talking about, you just refrain from saying it. As far as the Michigan Townships Association, your policy says if discussion is desired, then the item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. That's been on this agenda for probably going on 15 years. And yet, over the last couple meetings, you guys have, anybody that asks to take something out, you won't take it out. And then on top of it, Mr. Verkes goes into a long diatribe about how he feels it's important. That's what the discussion was supposed to be about, asking to bring it out and have it discussed. Mr. Batani said the same thing. Why did you guys not want to discuss it out in public and actually tell the citizens what we're getting for that, other than lobbying? Because people don't like lobbyists. And it's been pretty ineffective, to tell you the truth. If we had 650, whatever it was, 65,000, and we got down to 65,000. Pretty ineffective. The Michigan Township Association has not really supplied anything to this township. Did anybody go on a training program recently? Have they supplied you any books? Have they supplied you any literature? Oh yeah, it's easy to supply literature when you're a bunch of bureaucrats up in Lansing. But is it worth $5,500? I don't think so. That's what you have an attorney for. If I need some information, I call that attorney and say, this is what I want to know about, Rob. And you have to go to the Michigan Townships Association, and they will service you without us being a member. And in fact, one of the questions I had is there's 1,250, I believe, townships listed. How many are actually paying? Have you bothered to find out? There are some communities that aren't paying, right here in Macomb County. At least there were. And I suspect if they didn't pay once, they're not going to pay again. So why are we just running in lockstep and giving the money to them without at least discussing what we're getting from them? The last thing I want to talk to is, and it's been kind of a bone of contention of mine for a while, and I've kind of kept quiet about it, is the fact that every time somebody says something, Mr. Verkes gets up there and goes into long filibuster about how, with his point of view and saying whatever he wants to say, with the idea that nobody has the ability to say, wait a minute, you're wrong, until the next meeting. Well, that's what he plans on. That's not fair. I believe what Mr. Bardell Mr. Bardell was trying to imply is that maybe when you say something wrong, Ken, up there, and I've caught you at it many times, when you say something wrong and then I don't get a chance to come up and rebut you, I think that you ought to allow a 1-minute rebuttal so that the residents can see that some of the things you've said are not true. Now, in the past, I've resorted to shouting out, which gets onto camera. People hear it anyhow, but you get to pound on your gavel and say I'm out of order. I'd like to do it legitimately. And I think that would be a fair thing to do. The other day, you sat there and told us that the fire department, we never paid for television sets, we never paid for Barco loungers, and you had to be corrected by Mr. York. Actually, I believe I yelled in that one too. So I think it would be a nice option to allow the residents to have a basically a retort time if it's required. Yeah, some things that he says are correct. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for open government, not government run by a king. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. I apologize to the resident if somehow there was a misunderstanding that our board meetings are debates. They're not. The board meeting is the meeting where the Board of Trustees takes action to run the business of the township. What we do allow is we allow for public comment before we actually vote. So if we as a board believe that there's a need to take action on item 1 or item A or whatever is an item on our agenda, we make a motion. But before we actually vote on that motion, we open up the floor for public comment. It isn't a debate, it's an opportunity for residents to give their opinion to the board members in an open forum so that we might take a better look at it, or there might be something that we hadn't considered, or there might be some things that we might want to change in our motion. That's ultimately the goal. Regarding TVs and recliners, my position is I did not approve that. In the 6.5 years that I've been on the board, I don't recall that being an item that was before me. But I apologize if I misstated that position. I was not aware of that. And regarding the comments on the Michigan Townships Association, prior to taking the action during the public comment session, one resident asked me, what does the MTA provide to the township? So I tried to answer that question, because literally it was asked of me, what does MTA do for the township? So to the best of my ability, I tried to answer that resident's question. But I have no other public comments. I think just about everything that we talked about here, we've already talked about when we took the original motion or action by the board. Is there any other discussion?
Motion to adjourn?
All right, we got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Should have been done at like 7:20.
Thought so too.
I told the wife I'd be home by